Grant Whitley's thumb pressed along the edge of the red wax seal, testing it, feeling the weight of whatever was inside. "Don't!" He looked down. A black woman sat in the chair where his team had placed her 20 minutes ago, hands folded in her lap, gray wool coat still buttoned to the collar, despite the hotel's climate-controlled warmth. She looked at him the way someone looks at a person who is about to step off a curb into traffic. "That envelope is not yours to open." Whitley smiled the way men smile when they want you to know the smile isn't kind. "Ma'am, everything in this building is my concern. I warned you." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It carried exactly as far as it needed to and no further. He dug his thumbnail under the wax. Have you ever watched someone seal their own fate with their bare hands? Because in about 90 seconds, you're going to understand exactly what that looks like. Stay with me. 92 minutes earlier, the Seaview Grand Hotel stood at the end of East Bay Street in Charleston, South Carolina, the way it had stood for 40 years. Wide marble steps, polished brass door handles, a doorman in a navy coat who held the door for guests who looked like guests. The hotel had hosted 3 sitting governors, 2 federal circuit court hearings, and a sitting U.S. Senator's anniversary dinner. It had also accumulated, in the past 8 years, 11 documented complaints of racial discrimination filed with the South Carolina Human Affairs Commission. 6 had been closed without action. 3 had resulted in form letters. 2 were still pending. None of this was visible from the lobby. The lobby was all pale limestone and low lighting, a massive floral arrangement on a center pedestal that cost more per week than some people earned in a month. The kind of place that communicated its own rules through architecture. This space belongs to people of a certain kind, and you know whether you are that kind the moment you walk in. Farai Morrow walked in at 11:14 a.m. She was 42 years old. She wore a charcoal gray wool coat, slightly worn at the left cuff, dark slacks, low-heeled boots that had been resoled once. Her natural hair was pulled back loosely. She carried a brown leather satchel on her right shoulder, the kind that law students and public defenders carry for a decade before they can afford to replace it. A flat document envelope was tucked under her left arm, sealed with red wax, official court insignia pressed into the surface, a white label across the front, bearing a case number and recipient information in clean black type. She did not hurry across the lobby. She did not look uncertain. She moved with the quiet, contained purpose of someone who has learned to take up exactly the space she needs and not 1 inch more, because the world has spent decades trying to convince her that the right amount is none. She walked to the front desk and asked for the general manager's office. The desk clerk, young, blonde, a trainee lanyard around his neck, looked at her the way people look at something that doesn't match the picture in their head. His eyes went from her coat to the envelope to her face and back to the envelope. "Do you have an appointment?" "I have a document for Mr. Burke." "Mr. Burke is in a meeting until 1. Tell him a courier is here from the U.S. District Court with time-sensitive materials." The clerk picked up the phone. He murmured something. He listened. He set it down. "He says you can leave it at the desk and he'll collect it when he's done. I'm not authorized to release it to anyone other than Mr. Alton Burke directly. The chain of custody requires his signature." The clerk looked at her again. Then he picked up the phone again. That was when Grant Whitley appeared. 52 years old. Former Charleston PD, retired after 22 years on the force. Had worked hotel security at the Seaview Grand for 6 years, the last 3 as head of the department. He was broad through the shoulders, gray at the temples, with the particular bearing of a man who had spent decades in uniforms of one kind or another and missed them. He wore a dark blazer over a white shirt, a radio clipped to his belt. He read lobbies the way cops read rooms, entrances, exits, anomalies. Farai Morrow, standing at his front desk in a worn coat with a court envelope under her arm, registered as an anomaly. He crossed the lobby. "Can I help you?" His tone made clear he was not asking if she needed help. He was asking what she was doing there. "I'm waiting to deliver a document to Mr. Burke." "He's unavailable." "So I've been told. I'm prepared to wait." Whitley looked at the envelope under her arm. The red wax seal caught the lobby light. The court insignia was visible, but he was standing at an angle that let him misread the header on the white label, or choose to. What's in there? A sealed legal document. From who? From the U.S. District Court. Whitley tilted his head slightly. He had seen fake court documents before. Once, a man had tried to use a fabricated eviction notice to access a guest's room. Another time, a process server had been caught serving papers on hotel property in violation of the building's terms. He had handled both. He had built a file on both. His instinct was already building a file on this. I'm going to need you to come with me. I'm happy to wait in the lobby until Mr. Burke is available. Ma'am. His voice dropped a register. The Seaview Grand is private property. If you're not a registered guest and you don't have a confirmed appointment, I have the right to ask you to accompany me until we verify your purpose. Farai looked at him for a moment. She had calculated this possibility before she walked through the door. She had calculated most possibilities. She followed him. He took her to a small room off the service corridor behind the lobby, not an office, a room with a table and 2 chairs, the kind of room that exists in hotels for conversations that aren't supposed to happen on the floor. Farai Morrow, 29, 2 years on the hotel security team, followed and stood near the door. He was quiet and stayed that way. He had a small body camera clipped to his lapel, standard issue since the hotel had updated its security protocols 8 months ago. He had switched it on when Whitley first crossed the lobby. Whitley sat across from Farai. She placed the envelope on the table in front of her, folded her hands on top of it, and waited. I need to see ID. She produced her driver's license. He took it, studied it, held it at an angle like he expected the light to reveal something. He looked at the name. He looked at her. What firm are you with? I'm not with a firm. Then you're a courier service? I'm the authorized bearer of this document. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that's relevant to what you've asked. Whitley set the license on the table and tapped it once with his finger, a gesture meant to feel like authority. I've been doing this job for 28 years. Court couriers carry credentials from their dispatch service. They have paperwork. They don't carry sealed wax documents and refuse to say who they work for. I told you, I'm the authorized bearer. The document speaks for itself. Then let me see it. No. The words sat in the small room like something solid. Whitley had questioned hundreds of people in rooms like this. Most people hedged. Most people explained too much, apologized, rushed to hand over whatever he asked for, because the room and the radio and the 28 years all said, "Give me what I want, and this goes away faster." This woman gave him nothing. She sat with her hands on the envelope and said no, like it was the last word in the sentence because it was. If you've got a legitimate court document, he said slowly, you've got nothing to worry about by letting me see it. Mr. She glanced at his name badge. Whitley, I've told you clearly what I'm carrying and who it's for. You've seen my ID. My record is clean. I am not obligated to open sealed legal materials for hotel security personnel. If Mr. Burke is unavailable, I'll wait in the lobby. She reached for her envelope. He put his hand over it. She looked at his hand. Then she looked at him. I'd like you to remove your hand from federal court materials. He did not remove his hand. Dex. He didn't look away from Farai. Run her ID full check. Morrow took out his phone and typed. The results came back in under 2 minutes. Clean license. No priors. No warrants. Nothing flagged anywhere in the system. He looked at the screen, then at Whitley, then at the floor. She's clean, sir. Run it again. Morrow ran it again. Same result. He cleared his throat and said nothing further. Whitley leaned back in his chair. He was out of procedural moves, and he knew it, and knowing it made him angrier than not knowing would have. He looked at the envelope. The wax seal bore a design he didn't fully recognize, an eagle above a set of scales, a case number below it, text he couldn't read from his angle. I think this is a fraudulent document. He said it the way people say things they've already decided are true before they open their mouths. I think you printed a fake court seal and you're trying to use it to access hotel records or a guest room or something you have no business accessing. That isn't true. Then prove it. I don't have to prove anything to you. The document is sealed. It goes to Mr. Burke and to no one else." Whitley stood. He picked up the envelope from the table. She hadn't been holding it, had moved her hands when Morrow was running her ID. He held it up and turned it in the fluorescent light. The wax seal was deep red, pressed firm, the insignia sharp and clear from every angle. She said, "Put it down, Mr. Whitley." He kept turning it in the light. "I am telling you as plainly as I can, put that envelope down. What is inside it is sealed by a federal court. You are not authorized to open it. If you break that seal, you cannot undo it. That is not a warning I'm giving you out of courtesy. That is a fact." He looked at her for a long moment. Something in the back of his mind pulled slightly, a hair-thin thread of something that wasn't quite doubt but was in the same neighborhood. The voice, the exact, unshaking precision of it. Not angry, not afraid, not performing. Something closer to a person who has already watched this movie and knows every scene that's coming. He shook it off. Dex. He didn't look away from the envelope. She's on hotel property without a confirmed appointment, refusing to identify her employer, and I'm treating this document as potentially fraudulent material associated with an attempted deception. Morrow said nothing. The camera light on his lapel blinked once, twice, steady. Whitley pressed his thumb under the edge of the wax seal. It was thick, it resisted. He pressed harder. The wax cracked at the corner, a hairline fracture running inward like ice giving way. Farai watched his hands. She had said what she needed to say. She did not say it again. She sat with her back straight and her breathing even, and she waited, the way someone waits when they have already accounted for every version of this moment and accepted them all. The seal gave. Whitley lifted the flap and pulled the contents out onto the table. A thick stack of pages, typed documents, tabbed dividers, a cover sheet with a large official header that he now read in full for the first time. The header read, "United States District Court, District of South Carolina." Below it in bold, in the matter of United States v. Seaview Grand Hotel, LLC. Below that, Order of Judicial Inquiry and Administrative Subpoena, Patterns of Discriminatory Conduct in Public Accommodation. His eyes dropped to the signature block at the bottom of the cover sheet, a name written in clean, dark cursive beneath an embossed federal seal. The Honorable Farai Morrow, United States District Judge, District of South Carolina. He looked at the signature. He looked at the woman sitting across the table from him. He looked at the signature again. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. There were 46 pages inside the envelope. He turned through them without reading them. He couldn't read them. He could feel his own heartbeat in his jaw, in his fingertips, in the small bones of his wrists. He was looking for something, a discrepancy, a typo, a watermark that didn't match, anything that would let him reframe what he had just done. Some imperfection he could point to, some crack in the document that would give him a way out of this room. There was nothing. The document was real. Some part of him had known it was real from the moment the seal cracked. He had known it before that. He had known it the moment she said put it down and her voice did what it did, that flat, unbluffable certainty that does not belong to people who are lying. He set the pages on the table. Farai did not reach for them. "You'll want to call someone," she said. It was not a question. The door opened. Alton Burke stood in the doorway. The general manager, 48, silver cufflinks, a phone already in his hand because his assistant had pulled him from his 1 o'clock, the moment the front desk flagged that a court courier was being held in the service corridor. He looked at Whitley. He looked at the torn red seal and the scattered pages across the small table. He looked at Farai Morrow sitting in the chair with her hands folded and her coat still buttoned. His face went the color of old concrete. Behind him in the hallway stood 2 people in navy jackets with yellow lettering across the back, U.S. Marshals. And behind them a third figure, a woman in a dark blazer, federal badge on a lanyard, moving with the efficient calm of someone who has been staged and waiting. Special Agent Kezia Odum, FBI, Charleston Field Office. She had been in the parking structure across the street for the past hour and 40 minutes. The court's evidence packet carried a GPS tracker embedded in the seal material, standard protocol for high-risk judicial deliveries. The tracker had activated at 11:51 a.m. when the seal fractured. She had been moving before Whitley finished pulling out the first page. She walked past Burke. She walked past Whitley. She looked at the torn envelope, the broken wax, the fragments of the red seal in pieces near the table's edge. Then she looked at Farai. "Your Honor," her voice was measured. "Are you injured?" "I'm fine." "We received the tracker signal at 11:51. We were already staged when it fired." Odom looked at Whitley without expression. "He confiscated the document?" "He took it from the table while I was in this room." Farai paused. "He was told clearly not to open it." Odom turned to face Whitley fully. He had not moved since Burke appeared. He was still holding the cover sheet with both hands, and the paper had begun to tremble slightly between his fingers, not from any breeze in the room. "Grant Whitley." Odom's voice did not rise or fall. It occupied the room the way water occupies a container, completely without effort. "You are under arrest. Obstruction of a federal judicial proceeding, Title 18, United States Code, Section 1503. Interference with a federal officer in the performance of her official duties. Tampering with sealed federal court materials." She paused a single beat. "Those are the charges from this room. There will be others." One of the marshals stepped in behind him. The handcuffs closed with a sound that rang off the tile walls. Whitley found his voice. It came out too high, too fast. All the careful authority of 28 years collapsed into something that sounded like a man explaining himself to a room that had already stopped listening. "I didn't know who she wouldn't identify herself. She refused to show me credentials. How was I supposed to?" Odom stopped him with a look that required no words. "Your Honor." She didn't turn away from Whitley when she spoke. "He demanded credentials?" "Repeatedly." "And the envelope?" "Federal court insignia, case number, recipient's full name, the seal of the U.S. District Court pressed into the wax." Farai's voice was as steady now as it had been every minute in this room. "He told me he believed it was fraudulent, that I had printed it off the internet." Odom looked at Whitley for a long moment. Then she turned toward Morrow, who had not moved from his position near the door. "The camera has been running?" "Since the lobby, ma'am, continuous." "We'll need the footage." "Yes, ma'am." He reached and touched the device on his lapel. "Everything, from the moment he crossed the floor." In the doorway, Alton Burke had not spoken. He looked at the torn envelope the way a man looks at something irreversible, not with grief exactly, but with the dull comprehension that the shape of everything has just changed and will not change back. The federal proceeding that followed lasted 4 months. The judicial inquiry document that Whitley had broken open, the document he had called fraudulent, the document he had torn the seal from in a service room that smelled of recycled air and institutional carpet, was an order requiring the Seaview Grand to produce 8 years of internal communications, booking records, staff incident reports, and financial data relating to 11 discrimination complaints. Judge Morrow had signed it 3 days prior. It had been sealed by the court clerk's office. It had been delivered personally because the investigation included a secondary question about whether the hotel had been receiving advance notice of federal inquiries through a contact in the district attorney's office, which meant normal courier channels carried a risk of compromise. Farai had volunteered to deliver it herself. She had dressed the way she dressed on Saturdays. She had carried the bag she had carried for 11 years. She had walked in through the front door. What happened inside those 92 minutes was not a surprise to her, not because she had expected Whitley specifically, but because she had walked into enough rooms in her 42 years to understand how rooms receive women who look the way she looks when those rooms have already decided who belongs in them. The judicial inquiry into the Seaview Grand produced 43,000 pages of internal documents. The pattern inside them was not subtle. Booking records showed that black guests requesting premium suites were nearly 3 times more likely to be told the suite was unavailable on dates when reservation data confirmed it was not. Internal emails showed managers flagging reservations with names they characterized as potentially affecting the guest profile of the lobby. A group chat thread from 2021 contained a message from Whitley to 2 senior supervisors. "If they look like trouble on arrival, call me before you check them in." Whitley had not simply stopped a woman in a lobby. He had been the operating mechanism of a system that had been running for years. Alton Burke testified under immunity. He produced everything the subpoena required. He resigned before the federal consent order was issued. He did not go to prison, but his name was attached to the findings in a way that would follow him out of every professional room he walked into for the remainder of his working life. Grant Whitley did not cooperate. His attorney argued before the federal criminal court that his client was a security professional performing his duty, that no reasonable person could have been expected to authenticate the document without opening it, that Judge Morrow's choice not to announce her identity had created a situation his client could not have navigated differently. He called it a tragic error of judgment made under operational pressure. Judge Fairweather, the federal judge assigned to the criminal matter, a woman of 70 with wire-rimmed glasses, and the patience of someone who has heard every argument that has ever been made in a courtroom, listened to the defense's full submission without expression. Then she removed her glasses, set them on the bench, and looked at the defense table. "Counselor," she said, "your client held a document bearing the seal of this court. The insignia was visible to him. The case number was printed on the label. A woman who turned out to be a sitting United States District Judge told him, directly, clearly, and by your client's own account more than once, that he was not authorized to open it. He opened it." She paused. He then had the option to acknowledge his error and stop. He chose instead to tell a federal judge that her court document was something she had fabricated on a printer. He said that to her face, in that room, while she sat in handcuffs. The attorney began to rise. She held up one hand. "Your client did not make an error of caution," she said. "He made a sequence of deliberate choices rooted in a single assumption, that a black woman in a plain coat, carrying something official, could not possibly be what she said she was, could not possibly know something he didn't, could not possibly have authority he couldn't see." She set her glasses back on the bench. "That assumption is not a defense. It is the conduct before this court." The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 50 minutes. Guilty on all counts: obstruction of a federal judicial proceeding, interference with a federal officer in the performance of her duties, tampering with sealed federal court materials, 31 months in federal prison, permanent revocation of his security license, lifetime prohibition from working in any law enforcement or security capacity in the United States. 6 additional hotel staff members faced administrative sanctions for their documented roles in the discriminatory booking practices. 2 supervisors faced state-level civil rights charges separately. The Seaview Grand Hotel was placed under a 5-year federal consent decree. An independent civil rights compliance monitor was appointed. All booking and reservation data would be audited on a quarterly basis. Staff at every level, from housekeeping supervisors to the front desk, underwent mandatory civil rights training. A formal process for documenting, escalating, and independently reviewing discrimination complaints was required within 90 days of the order. A woman named Tamsin Rourke, who had worked the Seaview Grand's front desk for 6 years, testified on the second day of the administrative hearing. She was 34. She had filed 2 internal complaints about conduct she had witnessed in the lobby, once in 2020, once in 2022. Both times after watching black guests pulled aside and questioned in ways that white guests in identical circumstances were not. Both complaints had been submitted to Burke's office through the hotel's formal HR process. Both had come back to her marked insufficient evidence, no further action required. She told the hearing officer that she had almost not submitted the second one. She had spent a week convincing herself nothing would come of it, that the people who decided what mattered had already made their decision. That filing again was just wearing herself down for no reason. "But I filed it anyway," she said, "because someone has to, even when it goes nowhere. You put it on record because maybe later, someone else's complaint and yours together will be enough. You file it because the only thing worse than nothing happening is nothing being documented when something finally does." She was right. Federal investigators had located both of her complaints in the hotel's HR archive during the document review phase. They were cited in the case file. They were part of the documented pattern that made the consent decree possible. Her complaints didn't go nowhere. They went into the room where the verdict was read. 1 year after the morning she carried that envelope through the Seaview Grand's front door, Farai Morrow drove down East Bay Street on a Tuesday in November. The oak trees along the waterfront had gone amber and rust. The harbor light was flat and silver. She slowed as she passed the hotel. The marble steps were the same. The brass handles were the same. A doorman in a navy coat held the door open for a family arriving with luggage, 2 parents and 3 children, the youngest asleep against her father's shoulder. The family was black. The doorman held the door until the last bag was through, then asked if they needed help with the cart. The father said yes. They went inside together. Farai watched through the windshield. Then she drove on. She thought about Tamsin Rourke. She thought about the 11 people who had filed with the Human Affairs Commission and waited and received form letters or silence, and were left to wonder whether the system had simply misplaced them. She thought about the guest who had been told her preferred suite was unavailable and had booked somewhere else, and had never known for certain whether that was true. She thought about all of them when she was writing opinions. She thought about the distance between the law as it is written and the morning a person actually lives, what that gap costs, and who it costs, and how many years it can run without anyone being made to account for it. The law doesn't close that distance by itself. It never has. Someone has to carry it through the door. Someone has to sit in the room, keep their hands folded, breathe evenly, and refuse to be made smaller than they are, even when the room has dedicated itself to making them exactly that. Someone has to be willing to let the other person do what they will do, knowing that every choice they make freely, every assumption they act on without questioning, is another line in the record that won't disappear. Farai Morrow had walked into that hotel in a gray wool coat with a worn left cuff. She had counted on what came next. Have you ever walked into a room where someone decided who you were before you opened your mouth? What did you do with that moment? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe. At Velvet Reckoning, we don't let these stories disappear.